Hello, everyone. This is Tatiana Dudiez. I am hosting Thrive and Shine, and this show today is another amazing. And the technical side of my music is coming off and on, and we are just adapting because we do not edit. This is a show about authenticity. Yay! This is exactly the point. This is a show about authentic power and living in consciousness and leading our lives with consciousness. And in that light, I bring on to this show amazing guests from around the world, men and women. This is not a show about women only. This is a show about men and women who embody this type of leadership in their lives. They live their life in this way. They embody authenticity and they embody consciousness in everything they do. So today we have Jake Woodard, who is someone I fell in love with on Instagram, out of all places. And Jake is a spiritual healer. He does amazing work with men and women. He also caught my eye, particularly because he does a lot of work with feminine, masculine energy. And this is, of course, my world, my expertise, and the work I love to talk about and bring to my audience. So Jake, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
It's amazing. I'm so excited for you to be here and have accepted, because honestly, this is the first time that we actually see each other like this. We've been chatting on Instagram, and I've been looking at your work, and we continue to have technical problems with our music today. It just keeps coming in and interrupting, just to tell us that life is amazing.
I've learned through all of this is the universe has a very interesting sense of humor.
Right? I know. And it just keeps coming with this music, which is my music about life is about to change. So, hey, life is about to change with you right now. So tell me more about you and tell me more about how you came to this work. How are you the person you are today? What brought you to this beautiful work you're doing?
You know, it's a question I've often pondered of who am I? And I think for a long time, most of my life, I had no idea who I was. So I grew up in this small farm town in upstate New York called Greenwich. And most of your listeners have probably never heard of this town because it's got more cows than people. But I grew up on farms throwing hay and pounding nails, working construction at a very young age with my dad. And I was exposed to a lot of pain early on in life. And I just had so much energy as a young kid. I didn't know what to do with all of it. So I was constantly just like breaking things and like getting into trouble with the school and with my mom. Like my mom was constantly threatening to send me to like this military school for boys and like all these crazy different things.
Oh, you would have done well there.
Yeah. So I went down this path and I discovered something called Twinkies, and I became addicted to sugar. And I became very addicted to sugar, so bad to the point that my mom would literally have to hide snacks in the house because I would literally just go through the cabinets and eat everything out of the cabinets. And I was just like this little fat, chubby kid that just wanted like sugar, right?
Right.
And the bullies, they would call me 5x5 because I was 5 foot tall and 5 foot wide. I was like this little
my God,
block.
5x5. Today you probably find this funny, but back then, did you know they were calling you that?
Oh yeah. I mean, it was hurtful too. I mean,
yeah, no kidding.
That was kind of like the introduction to my pain. Honestly, the next level to my pain was the relationship with my father. And, you know, he was terribly abusive. He tried killing me multiple times. He was physically and emotionally abusive towards me. And I just never felt good enough in his eyes. Like I never felt like I was enough. And that was like the constant thing is like, no matter what I did, I was constantly seeking his love and validation, and he could never give it to me. So I felt really empty inside. And when I was 13 years old, I witnessed my older sister, my best friend, Jocelyn, stick a needle in her arm and become addicted to heroin. So I just went down this path of not understanding why she did this. And about a year after I discovered she was doing heroin, we had gotten into a fight in the kitchen, and Jocelyn was strung out on crack cocaine. And I can remember her saying to me, as she pulled out this butcher's knife and she's like, I'm going to kill you with this knife. And she threatened to stab me with this knife. So I ran in my bedroom and I locked the door and I laid on the ground and I was crying, and like this deep cry. And if your listeners have ever felt like this deep sadness before, they know exactly what I'm talking about, where your chest is like so tight and your throat is closing down and like you can't even breathe because you're crying so hard. And I'm punching the ground. I'm so upset and I'm punching the ground and I'm screaming, why me, God? Why me? And I'm like, why does this have to happen to me? And I'm screaming. And I looked up, and in the corner of my room, I had a 20 gauge shotgun that my parents had bought me for Christmas as a Christmas present. And I thought to myself in that moment, what would it be like if I just took my life now? What would it be like if I just ended all this now? And this was at 14 years old. So I sat there and I contemplated it for a while. And all of a sudden, this voice came in my ear and it was like, you can't leave yet because you have work here to do. And you have great love within you that needs to be shared with the world. So I started listening to that voice at a very young age. And I, fast forward 8 years of dealing with alcoholism, from angry violence, from getting arrested for fighting, like all these crazy different scenarios that I went through, toxic relationships, terrible relationships, and obesity myself. I was 80 pounds heavier than I am now. And I went down through all of these kind of every dark path I could find in life. And I got to the point where I was like, I'm either going to continue to be a victim of my life, or I can choose to take responsibility. And I started working on myself and I started healing myself emotionally, physically, mentally, spiritually, and just started really going in and healing the wounds that had been created in my childhood.
Beautiful. When you decided to make that shift, I mean, the way that you're describing it now makes a lot of sense. And yet in that moment, I know, by having gone through a lot of different pain moments in my life as well, we don't exactly see it as I'm either going to, to take this road of empowerment and growth and expansion, or I'm just going to get out of the pain, or I'm just going to take responsibility. Or how did it feel to you at that point?
It was like I had been asleep for most of my life, and someone came in and opened the blinds and I could see again.
Anything that triggered that? Any particular event or person? Or, when you get to that point of saturation and you're like, holy crap, I'm so done with this shit. Like, I just can't take it anymore.
Yeah, I would say like, a lot of different things kind of led up to this point.
Right.
But I was at this job that was quote unquote the dream job. I was making upwards of 6 figures at 23 years old. And I said to myself, I'm like, what the hell am I doing here? I'm like, I'm not serving my highest good and I'm not aligned with my soul's calling. Like, these words literally came out of my mouth. I'm like, I can't be here anymore. But this is the job that literally people stay at for 40 years, health benefits, vacation time, everything. And I'm like, I have to leave. Like, I have to leave this job. And so like, I was like, well, what can I do? Like, how can I like leave? What are my options? So I literally didn't even know what the word entrepreneur meant at the time. And I started researching, and all of a sudden I came across this word entrepreneur. I'm like, what is that? What is an entrepreneur? And so I started doing research, and I finally came across this book called Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And I read this book and I was like, oh my God, this is crazy. All my thoughts are in the book, the whole process of escaping the matrix. So I remember I was coming home, I went home one night at like 10 o'clock after I had been like reading this book all day. And I walked in my mom's house. I was like, Mom, you got to read this book. Like, it'll change your life. I'm leaving my job. Like, I'm becoming free. And she's like, get the hell out of my house. You are acting like a born again. And I'm like, what? I'm like, what? You don't understand. Like, we don't have to suffer here. Right. So I was like, all right, well, I can't stay here anymore. So I literally gave myself a 6-month deadline to leave the job, and I ended up leaving in 6 weeks because,
You couldn't take it anymore, of course. Yeah.
Because I was operating from impulse. And I'm like, I got to get out of here. My soul was like pulling me out the door. Like, it was so strong. The energy was so strong. I couldn't stay there. So that was when I really started I'm like, all right, well, if I'm going to leave, like, I have to start working on myself. I have to continue working on myself, because I had been working on myself for a while, but I mean, like, really working on myself.
Mm. And so what taught you the most in your life in terms of what is the deepest wound that taught you the most? Is it your dad?
I teeter back and forth with this, because I would say there were so many. I would say opening the bathroom door and seeing my sister laying on the floor with a needle in her arm was one of them. I would say my dad beating me with a fishing pole on a fishing trip because I got the line tangled so bad that made my whole arm bloody. That was one of them. I would say my dad throwing a hammer at my head as hard as he could, trying to kill me, threatening to shoot me with a shotgun. I would say that was one of them.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So I guess the two most powerful figures would be, if in terms of figures linked to your wound, would be your father and your sister. And where are they today in your life?
So my sister is still battling with addiction, with heroin addiction. She's kind of in and out of it. And my father, I've actually managed to heal the relationship with.
Oh, beautiful.
Yeah. So it's possible for the people listening, for people that you've truly hated and closed your heart to. I never hated anyone as much as I hated my dad. And when I learned to forgive, I healed that wound. Like, I'm talking over a period of years.
Oh, for sure.
Of crying and releasing, Mm-hmm. Like, a lot of forgiveness, a lot of patience, and a lot of boundaries were set throughout that relationship to get the relationship to being good now. Right. Like, that took a lot of work.
Of course. Of course. It's a lot of, sorry, I have. So along with the technical difficulties of the music, whenever I do the show from home, I have this postman who passes by exactly at the time of the show every time, and my dogs get very annoyed, not only with him but with the show altogether.
So your relationship to that postman is your teacher.
Yes.
And that's a perfect example, and that's a great transition, is like talking about how when people come into our lives that really trigger us, they're actually being brought to us by the universe, by God, to teach us lessons so we can further ascend in consciousness.
Exactly. And that's exactly how I wanted to also transition. So thank you. It's really understanding that life doesn't happen to us, it happens for us. What powerful sentence that is, when we really, really, really embrace it and really look at everything that happens in our lives to help us grow. And so being able to heal the deepest wounds really is what I think enables us to rise to a higher dimension and continue to ascend. It is a lot of work. It's a lot of commitment. I'm sure you have gone through so much to be able to heal and forgive your father. And yet the commitment to this ascension is essential for the work we do, right? Otherwise we become like every other person who says that they want to help and serve and contribute and maybe heal people, but if we have not done the work ourselves, then it makes it a little bit more difficult, I think, to do the work with others.
Well, yeah, because you can only meet people at the level you've met yourself. You can't help someone walk down a pathway that you haven't walked down yourself or be willing to walk down. Right. And that's why like conventional therapy might not necessarily work, because a lot of that comes from book information. When you've embodied the teachings and not just read about it, you can really help someone transform their life. And I give the analogy of like, if a carpenter only ever read in books how to build a house and they went to build a house, I would not be hiring that carpenter to build my house.
Nope.
Now, if that carpenter had 30 years experience building houses, he's probably a good carpenter.
Yeah.
because he's actually had hands-on experience of building houses. And it's
Correct.
the same thing with healing work. If you haven't actually healed yourself, you don't know what it's like to be in someone else's shoes that's going through a hard breakup, or maybe is depressed or suicidally depressed, or has been raped, or whatever they're going through. You don't know what that feeling is like.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. That's, to me, it's relating to a level of congruence that as coaches, whatever whatever we call ourselves, because the terminology is out there to be challenged, but the level of congruence is really, really, really important for me. It's vital, because I always give the example of a girlfriend of mine who I had met a while back, and she was a banker all of her life, like a very, very high level, and then she decided to help entrepreneurs and coach entrepreneurs, and I was like, how does that make sense? I mean, no offense to the level of knowledge she must have in terms of financial knowledge. I'm sure that's amazing. But the world of an entrepreneur is completely different than the world of a banker. It's like radically different. So congruence is vital. What else is important to you in terms of the work that you do to be able to bring yourself to this level of I was going to say authority. I don't like the word authority, but to a level that is forever rising, because that's for sure. We're always rising. So what else do you practice in your life in order to be even more of service for your clients, for the world out there?
I think just practicing being still, being understanding, being patient.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that for me comes through being in a meditative state. And when I say that, it doesn't necessarily mean sitting down in a lotus position in a dark room in front of a candle. I mean, practicing conscious awareness throughout your day.
Mm-hmm.
So if a driver cuts you off and you get triggered,
Mm-hmm.
there's your teacher.
Mm-hmm.
So I think always looking at life as one big teaching and seeing how I can pull that into my work. What can I use that? What tool, what practice, what exercise can I use to further help people along with their healing process? And the other thing too, honestly, is intuition. Intuition is like a superpower that we all have, and people ignore it. And they're like, I should have trusted myself, but you keep saying that. How come you keep ignoring yourself?
Right.
So I would say meditation with self-reflection and trusting your intuition is a good start for, understanding how all this works.
How do you find the level of understanding with men, specifically when you talk about intuition? I mean, we both know that intuition, oh my God, intuition is such a vast word, and also practice, right? I mean, it's something that continues to grow within us as we continue to practice and being in that meditative state all day as best as we can. So how is it received with men? I know women usually receive that a little bit more easily.
And what do you mean by received? How is it received?
When you talk about intuition with men, I know that you work with men and you work with women. When you talk about them really being open to following their intuition, following what comes to them, directly from what they call their gut.
Before we even get to that conversation, we have to talk about letting the armor down. Because if a person doesn't feel safe working with you or I or whoever they're working with, they're not going to open. They're not going to be open to receiving. So I think the first step is allowing people to feel safe. And you do that by being a safe place yourself, by working on yourself, by clearing out your channel so you can be more available to others. When it comes to, say, working with men and helping them to understand their intuition, it's all about allowing them to be vulnerable. Because the more a man can be vulnerable and express himself, express his wounds, the more he actually heals himself and clears himself. And the more you are cleared, the more your intuition arises, the more you can hear and listen to your intuition.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say for men specifically, they just have to learn how to be more still,
Mm-hmm.
which is the masculine energy, which is present consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
When men slow down and they're not all in their heads and they get more into their hearts, out of the mind and into the heart, and they slow down, they start to hear this voice. They start to feel this like tingling sensation. They almost have like this. I've had some clients have like almost like an outer body experience where they're having like this like euphoric feeling just because they're sitting down and meditating and just being present. Now, at first they fidget, they go all around and they can't sit still. But I'm like, listen, the more you practice this, even if you start with 5 minutes a day, just being still, just maybe you stare at a flame and a candle. The more you practice this, the stronger it becomes.
Mm-hmm. And so those men who actually, I wanted to know, what is the percentage of men and women? Is it equal for you? Who do you work with the most?
Oh, no. It's a good percentage women. I would say maybe 85 to 90% women.
Okay. So then is it safe and reasonable to say that it is more challenging for men to do this work because they have to bring down the ego and voluntarily open up to their vulnerability?
Absolutely. Men right now are carrying this shield that they developed from their fathers, like I did, because I was this 240-pound meathead tough guy. Listen, I went through it all. All right. I was the badass barroom brawler, all these things, like all this, right? I get it.
I love it. I wish you had like this series of pictures that you.
Oh, I do. I have them. They're on my Instagram.
We should see them, because it's like I have all these images of you in your past, It's so funny. Okay.
It's honestly like men have to let down this shield. This tough guy machismo bullshit is really what it is. It's like they think that that's being tough, but when you get a man to open up and tell his story, he can't even speak because he's so closed up.
Yeah. Oh, and
I'll share this story too. I won't give any names here, but I had a man at the retreat, at one of my retreats. He was 6'2", 240 pounds of solid muscle, all tatted up, really big, muscular guy. When he went to tell his story and like I started getting into him, like really helping him break down, he was like choking up because he was crying so much and was quivering. Like he had never done this before. Like he was so afraid just to open his heart. So like he didn't know what to do. And like he was literally just like pouring it out. It was the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. To see a man of like that structure and stature to just be so vulnerable and so expressive was one of the most beautiful things I've ever witnessed. And it was phenomenal too, because that's really what men need. They need to get out of their minds and more available to their hearts. But here's the thing with most men, they are afraid of their heart. So they hide out in their mind.
That's right. Exactly. It's so beautifully said. They are afraid of their heart, so they hide out in their mind. It's so interesting you say that, because that you were moved by the sharing of this man. When I did my work and I started awakening to the fact that the one thing I needed was to come back to my feminine, as I had been very much in my masculine energy, being a tough, so-called independent businesswoman, kick-ass, girl boss, whatever you want to call it. That's the identity that I had taken for a while because I was in hiding and I was also defiant against man. And so the work that ignited this desire to really go deeper was partly listening to these men share in the Tony Robbins event. I was with him for over a year, and I would go to all these events and I would hear the men share their pain being next to masculine women who either they were working with or mostly the ones who they were with as partners, intimate partners, right? And that is what broke my heart, actually. That is what actually woke me up to understanding how much pain we create in terms of women who are in their masculine, living in the masculine. And so they're breaking down, their vulnerability, them sharing their heart, seeing the tears, seeing the pain is what made me realize that I needed to shift. And today, interestingly enough, I started my practice on focusing on women, because I so relate and I just so want to give them all the tools. And recently I've decided to add men in my coaching as well, in my advising and all the work that I do, because of actually being witness to the pain I still see in men, including the personal, intimate relationships I've had with men who have not yet made that jump into their heart and don't even know what that's like, and are so afraid of living it and opening up. And I could see them open up, in moments, and then whoop, they would close it up and then open up again. And so the work with men is so needed also, in my opinion, in order to support women today. Because here we are rising and elevating and just doing all kinds of stuff and wanting to be more. And yet a lot of men have so much pain and trying to even just open up their heart. Right?
I agree.
It's so sad.
It's interesting too. What I've noticed from my observation is that men have repressed their feminine and women have animated their masculine.
Mm-hmm. Well said.
It's created like this imbalance within the system.
Mm-hmm.
And what I see happening, and we'll talk about things like sexual polarity in a relationship and how that works. But before we go into that, I think it's a good time to give a foundation of what masculine, feminine means.
Yes.
Because when I first heard these terms, I automatically thought, okay, male, female.
Right.
That's not
and therefore male is like the man, and it's not. It's the energies within. Right. Yes. Go ahead.
So we all carry a masculine and feminine energy.
Mm-hmm.
It just so happens that most men carry more of a masculine core, have a more of a masculine core essence. Mm-hmm. And most women have more of a feminine core essence. Mm-hmm. Now, it's not always the case, but we can talk about it man, woman in this case. Mm-hmm. The masculine energy is all about personal freedom. It's all about achievement, getting the job done, bringing things to an end, making the decision, structure, and it's all about building, right? It's very achievement based. It's very success oriented. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of the whole society that we live in. So we live in a very masculine society. So actually the whole entire society has actually totally repressed the feminine energy.
Absolutely. Totally.
Now the feminine energy is nurturing, it's compassionate, it's loving, and it has these different qualities that the masculine doesn't necessarily carry. Mm-hmm. The feminine is more like flow.
Yeah.
Okay. So you
it's
look
like
at the
curves of a body.
Right. It's like, yeah, exactly. The curves of the body, the wave of the hair.
Yeah. It's
the
playful.
Ocean going in and out. It's dancing, it's crying, it's laughing, it's expression. Mm-hmm. It is emotion. Right. Mm-hmm. So, and that doesn't necessarily, it's not about judgment. If it's crying, it's crying. If it's laughing, it's laughing. It's playing. But the feminine is fueled more by love, the feeling of love. Mm-hmm. And so if a woman has a feminine core, then she will do anything to feel love. Mm-hmm. And if she doesn't feel love, she starts to shrink herself and she starts to feel very undernourished. Mm-hmm. Now, the masculine energy is more fueled by structure and achievement and bringing things to an end. So like, that's why I feel like a lot of people think men are very selfish in the bedroom, because men are all focused on the climax, the bringing to an end, which is the masculine energy, where the feminine wants to keep going. The feminine is forever flow.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So it's really important to understand the basics of the masculine feminine energy. Yeah, and I've been studying this stuff for many years. So please understand that it's a lot at first. But when you understand how this stuff works in your life and your relationships,
it changes everything.
Changes the game.
Changes the game.
It really does. So I believe what's really coming through right now is that women have repressed the feminine energy because they don't feel safe. They don't feel like they can honor the divine feminine, right? And they also don't believe that the divine masculine is here to hold space. They feel like the divine masculine has some sort of agenda. He's like, what does he want from me? What is he trying to get from me? And most of the times it's totally true.
And that's right. So there is also a shadow to the masculine and a shadow to the feminine, right?
Well, there's light and dark to everything in life.
Right, exactly. Right. So unfortunately, what we as women have been experiencing mostly out of man is that there is an ulterior motive and an agenda, whereas the pure masculine is definitely in his trajectory that is very linear, and he wants to get to his end, but it's not the end that we have particularly experienced as feminine beings,
Right.
with that masculine. That's why it's been unfortunately, women today, and I forever want to educate women and men, of course, but women on what they have perceived and experienced from the masculine energy might not be the most pure form of masculine energy, because the masculine energy for a woman is freaking delicious. I mean, for
as is
us,
the
it's
feminine
like,
energy for a man. And that's why the
correct.
man will do anything to receive feminine energy. And here's the interesting thing about feminine energy. It can come through beer, which is flow. It can come through music, which is flow. And many different forms that men don't even realize is actually feminine energy. Talking is feminine energy, because masculine energy is like a pillar. Okay.
Yeah.
It doesn't move. It doesn't waver. Now
Yeah.
the feminine energy is always dancing. Okay.
Yeah.
So that's why, like, in, we'll say, India, dance is actually a sacred act, where in the United States, when a girl is a stripper, she's perceived as, well, that's wrong. That's slutty, or whatever we humans judge it as. But in India, it's actually a sacred dance where the feminine dances and flows and the masculine just watches. And that is really the practice. If you were to understand masculine, feminine, it would be like this. It would be like the flame flickering of a candle would be the feminine. And the person, the man, the masculine, if we'll say he's a man, is just sitting there watching the candle. Now, the divine feminine is that flame. And in order for her to feel safe, she has to trust his consciousness. She has to trust that his masculine decision can lead her to God. Now, if she doesn't trust that, she'll start animating her own masculine energy, and she puts up this masculine shield. Mm-hmm. And now they can't connect fully in their hearts. Mm-hmm. They can be best friends, but intimately they will never connect, because they repel each other like magnets. So if you look at like a magnet, a positive, negative, positive, positive, they repel. But when it's positive, negative, they attract. Mm-hmm. It's the same thing. That is the masculine, feminine energy in a very summed up version.
So how do you work with couples?
Yes, I have. Yes.
And how is that received? Meaning, how do they, of course, it's partly education. And then when you explain this, do you have success stories with couples that you can share?
So it's interesting, because if I work with a man and I start teaching him these practices of the masculine energy, the woman doesn't even necessarily have to be present, which is interesting about this. This is because, like, the divine feminine is a lot of wisdom. And she naturally, intuitively knows these things, which is very interesting, because when she hears this, maybe if she's listening right now, she's like, wow, this makes so much sense. And she's like, yeah, you already knew it, because that's your wisdom. Now, the man may reject some of this. He may go, well, this doesn't make sense. This is bullshit, because that's his ego, right? It doesn't make total sense.
Yeah.
When it comes to working with, say, a male, female in a relationship, what has to happen is the man needs to learn to hold space for the feminine as she expresses herself. So if she wants to talk and just chat, then he just sits there and listens, maybe for 10, 15 minutes. And then he says to her, listen, I'm going back to my mission. I'm going back to getting my work done. But in that moment, she's so nourished because she's heard, she's seen, she's felt. And that's what her heart craves. And she wants, in that moment, to feel claimed by the masculine. She wants to feel held by the masculine energy. And when the man can do that, when he can just sit there, stare directly into her eyes, not saying a word, not trying to fix her, not trying to correct her, not trying to prove her wrong or right, just be the stillness, be the consciousness, and watch how everything in that relationship begins to shift.
How powerful. And if, I mean, this is something that we so much need to talk about, because nobody really understands this, like the average person, man or woman. And it shifts everything, not only within us, but it shifts everything within relationships, within couples. And I believe that, and I'm sure you would probably tend to concur, that the wave of divorce rates in the last, let's say, 50 years is, I think, heavily attributed to the fact that for women, we have now, the more accessibility to power, in terms of the power, the outside power, the work power. We have more access to working and to expressing ourselves within a professional world. Yet it has risen in us a masculine energy within us that we just don't know how to let go of when we go through that door at night. And the masculine has, of course, as you were saying, you said repress the feminine. And so this duality, not only within each individual, but the couple, changes everything. It changes the game. And it leads, I believe it leads to divorce. I mean, it led to my divorce 12 years ago.
Well, when you say divorce, the first thing that I think of is masculine energy bringing something to an end. And what you just described is our culture is predominantly masculine based. Predominantly. That's why when you hear like crying makes you weak, crying is a bad thing. If you see someone crying, you might think that's weird, or like, if you see someone singing, you're like, whoa, what's going on there? Or if you see someone dancing, you're like, why are they dancing? Because that's all the feminine flair. That's all the feminine energy, right? So we look at those things as bad because it's expression. We're not supposed to express ourselves.
Right.
But we're in this masculine society. So what you wonder why the divorce rate is so high, because the masculine energy brings everything to an end. And now there's a lot of other factors that go along with this, but that was really what just came through. What I see in relationships that happens a lot, which I dropped a little pin mark before on sexual polarity, was in the beginning of the relationship, the man is in his masculine and she's in her feminine. He's taking her on dates. He's got total direction. He's making decisions. She's feeling led. She's feeling good. She's feeling claimed. She's feeling ravished, right? So she's like, man, I feel great.
Yeah.
Now, Mr. Masculine starts to get a little lazy.
Yes.
He starts to get a little lazy with himself, and he stops leading her. Maybe he starts going to her for more of a direction. He starts asking her to animate her masculine more and more and more. And
what do you mean by that? Clarify that for people who are still unclear. How does he animate?
He starts helping her to animate her masculine energy by asking her to make decisions. And it's not necessarily a bad thing for a woman to make decisions, because she should be able to make decisions. Absolutely. She should have masculine energy. She should be able to build businesses, be independent. That's all great. But when he starts dwindling from his own masculine energy and he goes, babe, I need you to make this decision. What would you like to for dinner tonight? Where would you like to go on vacation? He starts asking her. He's like, I can't make a decision. And she's like, what the hell? Like, I don't want to make a decision all the time. Like, what's going on here? And she's like, really like kind of triggered by this. So, but in the beginning, he was totally leading. He's like, listen, I'll pick you up at 7, wear this red dress. Like we're going here. Boom, bang, done.
Classic scenario. I mean,
yeah.
I totally relate to this scenario, and I know all this stuff. So, and it still happens. Yep.
Yeah. Yep. So over time that dwindles and he stops treating her with this masculine direction because he was so certain in the beginning. And now he starts treating her with this masculine like presence. And now he's actually kind of repressed his own masculine energy. And now she started animating her own. And now it's like two masculines coming together. They have no sexual polarity. And you ask most couples this too, like, when's the last time you had sex? That if they're having a problem, it's like, we haven't had sex in months, years, because there's no more polarity. There's no more sexual polarity because the masculine feminine has no arc of attraction to connect the bridge.
Yeah. And why people stay in that type of situation, I'm not sure. Fear, for sure.
100% fear.
For sure, but why would they, not seek help in those moments? That's a completely different subject, completely different conversation.
Right.
And so, what are your solutions?
Right. Yeah. Well, first of all, the person once again has to be open to receiving.
Right.
That's the number one thing to anything. And once again, with every situation, it's always a little different. So I wouldn't say there's one cookie cutter solution for anything.
No.
It's kind of like a mechanic, like I consider myself like an intuitive mechanic for working with people.
I love that. An intuitive
them.
mechanic.
Yeah. I have to go under the hood and see what's going on. What are the inner workings of this? We got to take a deeper look
at
at
how you
this.
say that.
Yeah,
I have to go under the wood. But that's a great analogy.
I think it's about bringing polarity back into the relationship. If there's no polarity, then they won't connect.
So with your work and the knowledge that you have, how easy is it for you, or how difficult is it? It depends. That's why I'm asking the question. For you to be in a thriving, intimate relationship.
For me personally, or for my clients?
No, you personally.
It makes my practice deeper. That just helps deepen my practice. It gives me the understanding as I work through it myself. I further teach others.
Isn't it interesting how also within our own practice of this work in our personal lives, how it brings us light in terms of the little shadow areas where we might have missed, in the teaching. And as you beautifully just said, how it helps us teach even more. How do you find, what is your assessment of this work being needed in men and women today? How much do people know about this stuff, in your opinion? What do you see out there?
It's like a foreign language that no one knows how to speak, honestly. Because when I speak about masculine and feminine energy, the amount of people that are like, still think that it's male, female, and doesn't make sense, or is like a feminist standpoint. It's really interesting, honestly. So like, it's really like a new language, but it is imperative to understand masculine and feminine energy. If you want to be in a successful relationship, you have to understand it. It's like understanding the language of love. Honestly, it's a part of the language of love. Absolutely.
I agree. It's part of the language of love. And so how do you bring it forward? What are your services? What do you do with your clients?
Well, in the beginning of everything, like I said, he or she has to first feel safe. And I will always go back to that, because that is something that I have learned time and time again. They have to feel safe. They have to be ready to open. And if they are not, I can't help them. And no one can really, because they're just not ready to receive. Their mind is too full. And in the beginning of anything that I do with anyone, what I like to do is identify their blocks, identify their root pain. If they give me, I'm lacking motivation, they give me some surface level thing like that, I always take it 20 layers deep to get to the childhood trauma, start working with the inner child, start understanding those pains and those blocks, to start working on the relationship with themselves. Because if the relationship with yourself is failing, how can you possibly have a successful relationship with another person, an intimate partner? You can't. So if your inner child is still wounded and you haven't even worked on healing yourself, and you're having all these relationship problems, it's not about the relationship. It's about you. It's a reflection of you. And I often call relationships reflections. Like, to me, my personal experience, like, a relationship is a reflection of your own wounds and your own greatness too. Which
brings me to underline once more is how many people walk away from relationships that are simply mirroring what they need to continue healing. And they walk away blaming the other one, when really, sometimes it doesn't work. Okay, fine. But there are so many opportunities to heal through the mirror of a relationship, right?
Well, we live in this disposable world where it's like, well, if this doesn't work out, just throw it away and go get another one. But when you do
Exactly.
that, you're just essentially getting a person with a different haircut, whatever. Maybe they have a different style. They might live in a different location, but it's the same energy. You know, maybe they have a beard now, right? But essentially
Oh, you grew a beard.
yeah, essentially you're dating, like you can go change, you can swap the bodies all day long, but if you're only going to attract to you what you are, right? So energetically, you're going to attract a similar person. So it's like you may as well do the work with that person and heal with them, because if you can heal within them, or just leave the relationship and go heal yourself, but don't go jump into another one. And I see people do this all the time.
Oh my God, I know.
So I think even before going into like, I don't even talk about masculine, feminine energy until like I really get to the root of their pain and their trauma to help them understand why they attracted this in the first place.
What is it in them that really was able to attract that energy? Because like, it's not just like-minded, it's like energy. We attract exactly who we are being in that moment.
Right. I have truly found in the thousands of people that I have worked with that at the root of just about every single human on this planet, they have a belief system that they are not enough and they're not worthy.
That's our common denominator.
So you start there. You start working with that. You start working with that energy and you start healing there. You start healing at the root, not at the surface level. You know, you can't just throw a bottle of medication at it and say, oh, it'll heal. No, you got to get to the root. Absolutely.
I agree. Amen to that. You got to get to the root. So I think we have just a couple more minutes, but I want to get to more inquisitive questions about you. That's what I do at the end of the show. So what can
I would like to end this with a poem too that I wrote.
Oh, beautiful. Yes. Okay. So before we get to the poem, because we can extend it.
It's a short poem. It's a short poem.
What can you not go without every day?
Well, first of all, breath. I don't think anyone can go a day without breath. You know, breathing consciously, breathing with intention, truly like checking in with yourself, checking in with your breath. The next thing is gratitude, giving gratitude to things in your life, to people in your life, for just the wind blowing on your face, the sun shining, being on this interview with you. Like, I just feel so grateful so often throughout the day. And like, it's really beautiful. Meditation is something that I do every single day. And like I said, I was saying earlier on, I'd like to meditate, try to throughout the day. Nutritious plant foods. That's another thing. Nourishing my body, like eating good foods that are actually healing to me. I'm trying to think, you know, what else, honestly, you know, those are some pillars. And love. I think love is one of the other things too. Feeling the vibration of love, I would say, is the last, you know, thing. If I was to give a few different pillars, is feeling the vibration of love in everything that I do. Allowing that love to pour through me.
And receive it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Giving and receiving. That's what the masculine feminine energy.
Yes, exactly. I do love you. I think you are such a beautiful being and you're so committed to your work in order to serve. And that's what I felt, you know, through just an Instagram account. So it's powerful. Love is powerful. Love is felt. However it's communicated. It's a vibration and it's an energy. And I felt that in you. So thank you. And I want to hear your poem. So go ahead. We'll close on that, on your beautiful poem. Thank you.
Let me just pull it up here. And by the way, I receive everything you just said. Thank you. Namaste.
Namaste.
Which to me, that means that the light within me honors the light within you.
Thank you.
Here it is right here.
All right.
Your time here is limited, but there's a reason why you visited. Think of all the people you can help heal when you open your heart and start to feel. The beauty of your essence comes from your loving presence. Remember to always stay curious and don't take things too serious. Don't stress the past or what happened last. Don't worry about what's to come. It will leave you feeling numb. Feel free to smile more than once in a while. Forgive others who have hurt you because they hurt too. Be gentle with yourself and you will find that inner peace is the ultimate wealth. See hard times as a way for you to grow, so the light within you can really start to glow.
So beautiful. I love how it rhymes, of course. But it's like it sings. It sings, you know?
Next
It's
time
so
I just got to make
beautiful.
sure it's more available, you know?
That's awesome. I love it. It's so beautiful. It's what yeah, there is no words to describe. It's beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing.
I had a lot of fun being on your show. Thanks for having me.
You are so welcome. You can come back anytime. Let's do another show and get deeper on one specific, perhaps, issue or challenge or side of either masculine or feminine, and play with it. So
yeah, I
thank
would
you
love to.
so much for being part of this. And I look forward to meeting you in person.
Yes.
One day,
absolutely.
maybe we work together. Who knows?
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thanks,
You as
Jake.
well. Thank you.
Take
Bye-bye.
care. Talk to you soon. Bye.